Allen Lund Company has new offices in Ogden, Utah and Indianapolis, Indiana. Check allenlund.com to reach them.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
The FMCSA has given another motor carrier an exemption for flashing brake lights. Meanwhile, a major hurricane is closing in on the U.S. Gulf Coast. I'll get the latest from Mark Schremer and S.J. Munoz of Landline Magazine. Recently, the NTSB issued a safety alert regarding the dangers of marijuana for teenage drivers, and the incident that prompted that alert involved a large truck. I'll talk with Dr. Robert Malloy of the NTSB. The Prove It Act would force federal agencies to think about the little guy when crafting new regulations. The bill's sponsor, Congressman Brad Finstad of Minnesota, joins the program. And finally, local taxes to support transportation are on the ballot in Georgia and California this fall. Scott Thompson covers that and more with our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel. But first, here's today's news. I'm joined now by Mark Schremer, senior editor, and staff writer S.J. Munoz of Landline Magazine. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Mark.
Yep, good to be here.
Mark, let's start with you. The FMCSA has granted an exemption regarding flashing brake light systems. And let's kind of start first with what company is asking for this exemption, and what specifically did they ask for?
So in this is Encore Flooring and Building Products. They have about 220 commercial motor vehicles nationwide. They asked for a specific individual carrier exemption to use this IntelliStop system, which is basically these flashing brake lights that are intended, to help with distracted driving and those type of rear-end crashes to help avoid them. We'll get into it a little bit, but IntelliStop previously had asked for an overall exemption and was denied that. So now each carrier is having to do it individually, which is a bit cumbersome.
A little bit. Before we get into that, tell us a little bit about this system. I mean, we say flashing brake lights, and that can mean a lot of things. What exactly does this system do? Yeah,
so basically it's as it hits the brakes, it goes from a lower level of lighting intensity to a higher level, and basically pulsates for like 4 times in 2 seconds when the brakes are applied, and then returns to more of the steady normal of what you would see when the brakes are engaged. It's basically to just catch a little bit more attention of the driver behind that the brakes are being applied, and so that's the system, and more and more companies are asking to use these type of brakes.
Okay. Now, and I think this is important. Do we actually know? I mean, I know that they say they're trying to avoid these rear-end accidents, but do we actually know, or do we actually have information showing that this helps highway safety?
Well, I know, so NHTSA has kind of reviewed it, and that was one of the things the company had put in some information saying that there's some positives there. But anytime you have something new like this, obviously it's going to be very anecdotal. It's hard to know for sure until this really plays out of how much help this would actually be. But I think from at least some of the early indicators, there's at least some reason for optimism.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier that there have been some other exemptions granted for this. Who else has gotten one?
So one I wrote about back in May, for instance, was Gemini Transport, and the same deal. They're using the IntelliStop system, and like I said, IntelliStop had previously asked for an exemption for basically for everybody, all carriers who wanted to use it, to be able to use it. And FMCSA came back and said, we want to do this on an individual basis. They're concerned about enforcement. They think by doing it on an individual basis, so each carrier asking for the exemption, it'll allow enforcement to know, okay, we can look specifically, these drivers, these trucks are allowed to have this. Like I said, I think it makes it more difficult, and Telestop actually took this to court over this matter, ended up getting rejected in court. So this is where they're at, where we're going to have to spend government time and dollars going through these individually. And if they're just approving all of them, then it starts to make you wonder, okay, why can't this be a more broad exemption?
Well, and the logic there is kind of confusing to me, because you're talking about they think it's easier to look at every single truck and see, now, is that the carrier? Is that the carrier? Versus just, oh, this is how brake lights work now.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point. I don't know if it's their way of trying to make this kind of like a pilot program. I'm almost like we'll have a few, see if it works, but we're not going to sign off on having everybody have it all of a sudden. But trying to get inside their head would probably not worth it, or something that I would necessarily want to do. But but I definitely get your point.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on to another very pertinent topic today, SJ. And I know that you've been covering this. Hurricane Helene, which is just become a hurricane today, is approaching the U.S. Now, inevitably, some truckers are in the path of this thing anytime it's going to hit anywhere in the U.S. What is the current situation regarding the storm?
Yeah, like you said, I was just upgraded this morning. Of course, it's always a fluid situation with these storms. It changes by the minute. So this is the latest information we have, and could change here at any moment. But yeah, Category 1 at this point, I'm expected to hit the Big Bend area, if that rings a bell to anybody. Tallahassee is one of the major cities in that region. Late Thursday is what the forecast models are showing at this point. At that time, could be a Category 3, or even some forecasts are calling for a Category 4, which out of 5, obviously, we're getting pretty serious here. That would be, 120 to 125 mile an hour winds of the sustained variety. So definitely some damage there. As of, you mentioned the emergency, that covers 61 counties in Florida. So, a good segment of land there. And then also, up to the north, Georgia has also enacted its emergency. They're expecting, of course, flooding from it, maybe not the storm surge or, that type of issues, but they're telling residents there to be prepared to have no power for up to 72 hours. And that's in Georgia. So Florida, we could obviously be looking at some, much more of extended amount of time, considering it's expected to, hit that state. And like I said, moving situation, but at the last check, 20 counties in Florida had evacuation orders, either mandatory or voluntary, in place. So definitely kind of the advice, of course, with most storms, but in this case with, potentially Category 4, get out while you can, because basically today, it's the last chance you have, and, it's going to be here before we know it.
Okay. Well, we've run out of time here, but folks, we do want to let you know you can see SJ's coverage of this, including what this emergency order covers, at the website landline.media, where you can also read Mark's coverage of what's going on with those brake light exemptions. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I've been talking with Mark Schremer and SJ Munoz of Landline Magazine. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Mark Reddick. The OOIDA Foundation is accepting applications for the OOIDA Mary Johnston Scholarship. You can find more information or apply at ooida.com. The deadline is February 1st. Next, a federal safety agency issues a warning about marijuana and driving. A bill in Congress would force federal agencies to think about the little guy when crafting new regulations. And Scott Thompson will cover local tax issues on the November ballot that would support transportation with state expert Keith Goebel. We'll be right back. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Capital Reman is your leading source for quality remanufactured engines and components. Capital Reman stands ready to serve all OOIDA members to help reduce costly engine repairs or replacement. Visit capitalreman.com today and use code OOIDA10 to save.
Penske is the trusted source for quality used trucks. Whether you search our website, call our sales staff, or bid at our online auction, you are sure to find the right used truck for your business. Visit PenskeUsedTrucks.com to view our inventory and learn more.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now. Welcome back. Recently, the National Transportation Safety Board issued a safety alert regarding the dangers of marijuana for teenage drivers. And the incident that prompted that alert was a collision caused by a teen driver and involving a large truck. I wanted to learn more about the alert and the issue overall, so I called Dr. Robert Malloy, the director of the Office of Highway Safety at the NTSB. The National Transportation Safety Board issued a safety alert regarding marijuana and teen drivers, and it was accompanied by a final report on a crash involving a large truck and a passenger vehicle with 6 teens inside. What can you tell us about this accident, first of all?
Well, we looked at this crash. When we were looking at this crash, we learned that the crash involved, as you said, a teenager who was driving a Chevy Spark and had gone out to lunch with 5 of her friends. As they were coming back from lunch, she was at an intersection in Tishomingo, Oklahoma, and as she approached a stop sign, she just had a car in front of her, so she slowed down. But as that car pulled out through into the intersection, she followed it and accelerated through a stop sign. And unfortunately, there was a truck approaching, tractor trailer, and she had pulled out in front of the tractor trailer. The truck operator did his best to stop his vehicle, responded very quickly, but still was a collision that resulted in all 6 girls dying. We determined that the cause of the wreck, was the teen driver's acceleration through the intersection after briefly slowing without stopping due to a distraction from having 5 other teens in the car, her limited driving experience, and likely impairment from marijuana.
Okay, and that of course is the big issue here is and the subject of the NTSB alert was the marijuana use. How much more frequent has this type of problem become in the wake of so many states legalizing either medical or recreational use of marijuana?
So we've seen an increase in number of crashes in states that have allowed for the legalization. 6% increase in the total number of crashes, 4% increase in fatal crashes. So we are seeing an effect on safety on our roadways.
And what essentially do you think is behind that? I mean, obviously marijuana use and impairment, but I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that are listening and thinking, well, I'm not that bad when I smoke marijuana. And although that may seem obvious to other people, the problem with that statement, can you go ahead and explain it in layman's terms?
Certainly, Mark, and you're onto something there. First off, we know that marijuana will affect drivers' performance, that it will, impair your judgment, increase your reaction time, have more difficulty controlling the car. So those are things that we know will happen. Unfortunately, there's a disconnect between what we know will happen and what people think will happen based upon their own experience. And that's particularly something that we think is a problem with teens, that they may know, something like alcohol will impair driving. And the vast majority of kids, when surveyed, will say, alcohol is dangerous to use while driving. But that drops substantially when you ask about marijuana. So there's this perception that it's not impairing despite the fact that it is impairing. Well, and another aspect of that, too, is that a number of teens will think that if it is legal to use in the state, it's legal to drive. 33% of kids, when surveyed, thought that if it was legal in the state, they could use it to drive while driving.
And, of course, that is not the case, is it?
No. No state where it's legal to use marijuana, either for medical or recreational, is it legal to drive impaired by marijuana.
So the DEA is currently considering whether to change marijuana from a Schedule I drug to a Schedule III drug, and that's making a lot of news out there. First, can you explain the difference between Schedule I and Schedule III? What does that mean?
So when you think about the difference between Schedule 1 and Schedule 3. Scheduling is something that the DEA does with regard to drugs that may be something that people may abuse, and the more likely it is to be abused would be Schedule 1, as that risk of abuse and chance of being kind of hooked on the drug, that risk for abuse gets less, schedule number goes higher. So it would basically be moving from a Schedule 1, which is a drug that has really no medical approved purpose and is highly at risk for abuse, to something considered less risky with regard to abuse and may have a medical purpose that's recognized. And that's concerning for us, particularly with regard to testing for impairing substances, that Schedule 1 substances are required to be tested for in DOT tests. But if this change to the schedule happens, we have concerns that might have unintended consequences with regard to testing of safety-sensitive personnel like truckers, drivers, with regard to testing them for impairing substances.
Just because we've had this confusion on the part of some people in the public, with states having legalized it to some extent or another, I just want to clarify, if that change is to take place from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, would the legality of driving while taking marijuana change, or would anything about driving and the use of marijuana change?
So the drug itself, marijuana, will still be impairing with regard to your driving. It will still be illegal to drive impaired by marijuana, regardless of the scheduling. And so, there wouldn't be an effect as far as your ability to legally drive with it.
What are some of the specific problems that you can tell us about that are linked to drivers being under the influence of marijuana? You mentioned some of them earlier, but I'm wondering if you can go a little bit deeper on that topic.
The research has found that people will, have difficulty with their reaction times. So they may be slower to respond to a changing condition on the roadway. They may make poor decisions because they've used marijuana. We know that they'll have kind of control or speed issues while controlling the vehicle, resulting from that impairment.
To what extent is the problem made worse by the lack of a roadside test for marijuana impairment, similar to a breathalyzer for alcohol impairment?
Well, I think one of the biggest aspects of it is that we don't really know the full impact of marijuana on driving, is because of that lack of an easy test that's able to be done roadside. And some of the things that we've addressed with regard to some research we did looking at the effects of multiple drugs on driving performance was the idea that in many cases when you find someone's impaired with alcohol, you stop testing. So when we were looking at test results from, I think, 6 different states, we found that the number one impairing substance use was alcohol, but closely behind was marijuana, and we were finding that 1 in 3 drivers were impaired by marijuana that were tested.
How do you test for marijuana with the lack of that roadside test? I mean, what do people have to go through at this point in the enforcement community in order to show impairment for marijuana?
I think right off the bat, that people can be tested for marijuana impairment. We have made recommendations that states use oral testing to detect for marijuana use and impairment. But there's also drug recognition experts that can identify the signs of marijuana impairment. So there are ways of detecting someone's impaired by marijuana. Many states also have a zero tolerance for marijuana in your system. So if you have any level in your system, you will be assumed to be impaired. So what we're trying to do is get more states to be using the roadside oral testing, but also more states we made a recommendation to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to work with states to ensure that their drug labs are meeting the current standards with regard to marijuana testing.
That's interesting. I had not heard of the oral test before. At this point, how accurate is that test at roadside? Because we know that some of the tests that are used in other contexts, marijuana can last in the system or show up in your system well past the point of impairment, sometimes even days afterwards. How accurate is the oral testing?
I can't go, into the details on exactly how accurate they are. I know that is something that we've recommended the states use, that they can detect. One of the difficulties is, unlike with alcohol, we don't have that same level of a real good understanding of the amount of alcohol in your system, like with a blood alcohol content. It's not the same with marijuana. I know it can detect, and I think that's the first step we need to do is to be detecting that people are in crashes with the substance in them, so that we can begin to get a handle on how big and widespread this problem is, and then take actions to reduce that.
Okay. Now, the National Transportation Safety Board chose, in this instance, to focus on teen drivers in the notice it put out. Is the problem worse in that group as compared with other segments of the driving population?
One of the reasons we focused on the teen drivers is the fact that, one, they're the group that we saw with the largest misperception with regard to the effects of it on your driving, that parents, when they surveyed, had a more realistic understanding of the impairments associated with marijuana, still thought it was safer than alcohol, even though it is not. But so that's one, their perception of the safety of driving under the influence of marijuana. The other aspect is, teen drivers are new at this. They don't have a lot of experience. And so anything that's going to affect their ability to drive negatively will just be a kind of compounding factor. It will make the fact that they're inexperienced that much worse. So that's a particular concern we have, is that they're inexperienced. They have a perception that it's safe to drive with it in your system. So that's why we target it.
Okay. That's all I have, sir. Is there anything else that you want to add or that you think is important for people to know about the topic?
Well, I think one of the things that we want to make sure people know is that when we're talking about cannabis, we recognize that there are things happening across the country with regard to the legality, both for medical and for recreational purposes. But the one thing we want to be clear, and the evidence is clear, is that using cannabis in driving is unsafe, and that will increase the risks for yourself and those around you. So the two don't mix.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. I sure appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, and you have a great day, Mark.
That was Dr. Robert Malloy, the director of the Office of Highway Safety at the National Transportation Safety Board, talking about a safety alert issued by the agency regarding the dangers of marijuana use by teen drivers. It's worth noting that the National Transportation Safety Board does not have the ability to issue regulations. The agency's mission is to investigate crashes not only on highways, but also in aviation, in ships, in railroads, and pipelines. It does make recommendations to other agencies for possible regulations or other actions based on those investigations. You can learn more at their website, ntsb.gov. Again, that website is ntsb.gov. You can find that link at our website, landlinenow.com. Just click on the headline or photo at the top of the page. That's where you'll find all the website links, email addresses, and phone numbers that we mention on the program. Again, that's at our website, landlinenow.com. And a quick reminder, no matter what your state laws say, the use of marijuana by truck drivers is strictly prohibited by federal regulations, and the issues come up quite a bit since so many states have legalized it. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Truckdown.com. Whenever you have a breakdown, you need Truckdown.com. 24/7 access to 40,000 verified heavy-duty repair vendors nationwide. Repair secured. Load assured. Truckdown.com.
Firestone tires are for more of everything, with more durability for more miles and more confidence in your fleet. Firestone's tested tires help fleets save with value where it matters most. Learn more at bridgestonenationalfleet.com/4moremiles.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a CAT scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget miss accuracy, weigh your truck on a CAT scale.
Landline Now, welcome back. Our next guest recently introduced a bill in the U.S. House that has small business owners in mind, and that includes owner-operators who know exactly how burdensome regulations can get in the way of making a living. The Prove It Act would force federal agencies to take that into account when putting new regulations in place, and joining us now to talk about it is Representative Brad Finstad of Minnesota. Congressman, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
And joining us here in Studio A to carry some of the load today, Mark Shermer of Landline Magazine. Mark, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's start with your bill, Congressman Finstad, H.R. 7198, the Prove It Act. I very briefly explained what this is all about there just a moment ago, but in your own words, could you tell us what this bill aims to do?
Yeah, so I have the honor of representing southern Minnesota's 21 counties in Congress. I am a farmer and a small business owner. I've seen firsthand and heard numerous stories of the negative effects of government overreach when it comes to overly protected regulations and the rules-making process. And really, it was frustrating for me as a legislator to see the essentially government overreach that is happening outside of the legislative process. So the Prove It Act is really a way to go after the regulators as they develop rules and regulations to try to implement some of the laws that we pass. That's really where the rubber hits the road, and we see a lot of negative impacts on businesses and owner-operators, farmers, and it's in the tune of, all right, what does the rule say? How do we comply with this rule? How do we meet this regulation? And what we have found that it is costing Americans billions of dollars a year, and since 2009, it's estimated that it's over $730 billion and over 480 million hours in paperwork time added to our small businesses. So the Prove It Act is saying that, all right, executive branch, all right, bureaucrats, when you start adding these rules and regulations, you have to take into account what it's going to do to the businesses and owner-operators and farmers when it comes to the burdensome regulations and costs. And that cost has to be accounted for because that's real money that affects real people, and I hear it all the time.
Congressman, I know this bill is for all industries, but maybe tell me a little bit of what you've heard from the trucking industry in this regard, because, so much you hear about anytime there's a regulation, you hear about what the large fleets and big businesses have to say about things. But in trucking, for instance, I think it's about 96% of the trucking operations out there are small businesses, as you speak to. So in regards to this bill with trucking, what have you heard? What was the feedback?
Yeah, so actually it's the owner-operator or the farmer or the small independent owner, business owner, who is the most adversely affected in this regulatory climate because they don't have the HR department. They don't have the regulatory department. They don't have the lawyers. They don't have the staff that can help them navigate the rules and regulations. So it becomes, so as an owner-operator, I'm hauling a load today. Well, I got to take time out of my day to try to figure out how to implement this new e-log system or implement this new whatever harebrained idea government's trying to throw at me. When I need to be out there making money and doing what really the country needs now more than ever, and that is a secure, strong, stable trucking industry and small business industry that's really the lifeblood of our economy. And so that's what I'm hearing. It's just we just don't have the time to do it, and it's always changing. Just when you think you've caught up to the new climate of what regulations and what rules we have to comply with, there's another harebrained idea coming at us tomorrow, and it's just so hard to keep up, especially if you're that small independent.
Yeah, it sounds like, and I'm curious about the origins of this, because it sounds like you have spoken with truck drivers who have expressed what harebrained ideas out there are affecting them in a negative way. How did this come about? I mean, was it a conversation? Was it multiple conversations with people, truck drivers included, who told you the problems that they're seeing out there? How did this come about in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, the story is maybe a little bit interesting. I mean, so first and foremost, I'm just a regular guy serving in Congress. I own a couple semis myself. I haul my crops every year off my farm with my semi. I have a small business. We have a few semis where we're hauling our products all over the country. So I see it and live it firsthand. But moreover, I have the opportunity and the honor to live in one of the greatest communities in southern Minnesota and quite frankly this country, in New Ulm, Minnesota. We have tons of trucking companies that are coming and going, hauling for Kraft and 3M and McDonald's and Lowe's and you name it. And these over the road folks are, these are my neighbors. These are the people I go to church with. So I'm hearing it day in, day out. And that's really, I guess my advice to any of your listeners is do not take for granted the opportunities to reach out to folks that sit in Congress or to sit in your state legislature, because there's still a few of us that put our pants on the same way that everyone else does, and we're just average Joe and James. My dream is to live happily ever after on my farm, not in some marble office in Washington. So I want to be able to do that in a way that provides opportunity to succeed, not just for me, but for my kids and future generations. So it's kind of a mix of lived experience and then also hearing and just kind of reaffirming those stories through the trucking folks and friends that I have and to hear it firsthand. I'm one of the few members of Congress that has had a Class A and CDL license. So, it brings a little bit of a street cred to that conversation because when the bureaucrats try to tell me how things should and shouldn't work, I can ask them. I say, have you ever been behind the wheel? Have you ever drove a truck with a 53-foot trailer? Have you ever had to haul 1,000 bushels of corn to market? And if the answer is no, then you better start talking to people that do it.
100%. And, Representative, it's no secret right now, how divisive it can be in politics. How refreshing is it that you're able to have a bipartisan bill right here, and how important is it to come together, during this time and something that isn't by party lines, but really just, for the good of everyone?
I tell people quite often that, what we see of our politics and of our government is probably the worst that we have to offer. It's the 10% extremes on both sides that are hollering and verbally punching each other in the throat. And that's what's getting the media attention. But there is still a lot of us that are committed to the good old, American dream and the good old way of governing, and that is, more of a citizen-type legislature that has, regular folks like me that's willing to roll our sleeves up and get to work and get things done. Now, with that being said, in government and in Congress, it is a math game. And, you need one more yes vote than no votes to win on these things. So it takes relationship building. But I tell people all the time, our country would not survive if our everyday life was lived in the toxic political environment that our Congress sometimes shows us. How would our small towns operate? How would our churches operate? How would our small independent businesses operate? How would our counties and communities operate if everything was a verbal punching match over some emotional charged political issue? And the answer is it wouldn't work. And so we as a country need to demand and ask more and ask for better from our elected officials. And, I take that pretty serious as being one myself. I think Congress has a lot of work to do to shape up and to really provide that adult leadership and be the adults in the room that are making decisions that can really help future generations.
Yeah, as Mark mentioned here, this is bipartisan. You've got a Democrat on board already, which I think speaks to just what a common sense piece of legislation this is, that it does speak to, as you kind of pointed out there, both sides of the political aisle. To that, to that right there, what is it about this bill in particular that you think does speak to everybody, whether they be Republican, Democrat, Independent, what have you? I guess it really does speak to the fact that there are a lot of regulations out there that just don't make sense to a lot of people. Is that kind of the idea that you think transcends party lines here?
Yeah, I definitely think that speaks to a lot of folks on both sides of the aisle. The other piece is, there's always this battle in this country over the three different branches of government, right? You in the legislative branch think you have these great ideas and you pass laws, and then you sit back and get frustrated when the executive branch tries to implement those laws through rules and regulations. And And then we get mad when those rules and regulations are enforced and the judicial branch comes in and messes it up and is not putting bad guys in jail anymore. And so there's this constant battle. So that transcends party lines. That's more kind of a good government idea. So, I'm honored to have Representative Caraveo stepped up on the Democrat side to see the common sense value in this piece of legislation. But I also think that, people like Representative Caraveo and others, they hear it from their small businesses. They aren't immune to hearing the frustrations from their constituents as, nor am I. And so I think this speaks also volumes to the folks that are willing to step up and express their frustrations when they see government not working. And again, that's not a party issue. We got to tear the R off our sweater and the D off our sweater and start putting the USA back on our sweater. And this is one of those bills that can do that.
Obviously, the more attention that you can give to a bill, the better. Have there been any conversations about a companion bill in the Senate?
Yeah, we're having conversations. I know Senator Joni Ernst and others are interested, and they're the kind of folks that are spitting common sense left and right. So that's the folks we're going to go to, and I know they hear it. I've had conversations with a few different senators on this, and they're hearing the frustrations just like we are.
While we have you, Congressman, wanted to ask you about another piece of legislation you recently co-sponsored, the DRIVE Act. Any listener of this show or reader of Landline Magazine knows that this bill would bar FMCSA from imposing a speed limiter mandate. This kind of folds in really with the Prove It Act in a lot of ways. At least I see it that way. What prompted you to sign on to support the DRIVE Act?
Yeah, I don't have a single driver that I've talked to that says, you know what we need? We need more government in our cab.
Yeah.
Give us more regulation. Give us more nanny state government to regulate the speeds. Again, this is coming. I've used the word a couple times, but this is another harebrained idea that comes from folks that have never been in a semi, never operated a vehicle in the situations that you all of your listeners that I've had to operate it in, and to restrict speed and to have again government intrusion right into our business office, because that's what it is, right? It's our business office, creates an unsafe environment. And the ultimate question is, who are we saving ourselves here? What has been the front page story all across this country that is scaring people to say, you know what we need? We need to regulate speed, right from the cab. It's a head scratching moment again, like we're trying to fix something that isn't broke, and to what cause? And then where does it stop? Once we have allowed government into our cab to regulate the speeds, what are they going to regulate? They're going to come back and say, well, we're going to fine you now because you consumed too much diesel today, or you did this, or you did that. I mean, it is just it's a scary situation that I think has long-term effects that could be very devastating to the industry.
Congressman, you've been very generous with your time here. Just wanted to give you a moment as we wrap things up to maybe deliver a message to our truck driving listeners and readers out there.
Yeah, I mean, I just cannot scream from the mountaintops loud enough. Thank you. Thank you for being the veins and arteries of our economic prosperity in this country. You are what keeps America going. And we desperately need to step up and support you however we can. We have to add more parking spots for you. We have to add more opportunities for you to, from an education, recruitment, and retention standpoint. We have to do more to make sure that we're not the heavy hand of government regulating you out of business. We have to make sure our roads are safe for you. But ultimately, on behalf of me, my family, and the 750,000 people in southern Minnesota that I represent, I just want to say thank you.
And another thing to echo, including what you just said there, you said earlier, reach out to your representatives, let them know that they need to support the Prove It Act, to support the DRIVE Act and other legislation like this that is going to help them in their livelihoods. As you point out, that is very important. Congressman, thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate it. And maybe we'll talk to you again soon when this thing passes.
That sounds great. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to your listeners.
Yeah, thanks again.
Thanks so much. Our thanks to Representative Brad Finstad of Minnesota. We've got to take a break now, but stick around. There's more Landline Now right around the corner.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truckstop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2024 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020
and get your life back.
If you're running ultra-low sulfur diesel in your vehicle, make sure you are prepared and protected all winter long with Howe's Diesel Treat, the #1 anti-gel product in North America from the 100-plus year trusted brand Howe's Products.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Welcome back to the home stretch of the show today. We'll spend the rest of our time looking ahead to November 5th, Election Day in the U.S., and a number of ballot measures dedicated to transportation issues. And joining us, as always, with the breakdown is Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine. Keith, how you doing?
Scott, doing well. Any opportunity to talk about transportation questions, ballots?
It's why you get up in the morning.
The elections.
It's why
is a good day.
It's why you get up in the morning. I know. We're going to start in Georgia, and we've got a number of counties, I think at least 7 that I counted here, that are going to be voting on transportation questions come November 5th. I want to start, though, by talking a bit about Georgia and the way they handle transportation taxes, because it is a bit different than the rest of the country.
Yeah, and I'll say you mentioned 7. I will say at least 7.
Okay,
or
good.
at least 7 counties, because on an annual basis, we talk about transportation questions on ballots. If there is one state, I say if there are 2 states that are you can guarantee are going to have quite a few transportation questions on the ballot around the state, it is going to be Georgia, the other one being California. But yeah, in Georgia, how long ago does it go back? It's about 10 years, I think, that they authorized counties to be able to implement 1% taxes for transportation work. These taxes, they can be for up to 6 years. And in some cases, you see counties that have not approved that transportation tax, and you have other counties that have approved it and they've kept it, and then some counties where they have approved them at one point and then they decided no longer to have them, and now maybe they're pursuing bringing them back on board. So there's always a lot of stuff going on as far as transportation questions for local questions throughout the state of Georgia, and yeah, it's this for locals. They're probably going to be more familiar with this term. It's the Transportation Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax, or as they affectionately call it there locally, is a T-splost.
No, they do not.
Yeah, well, no.
Do they really?
Whenever I'm looking at it, when I look at coverage, you see
T-splost,
the acronym, and it's like, okay, I see what they're doing here.
All right.
Anyway, but yeah, the focus again on this transportation, this local sales tax questions that they see around the state is for roads and bridges, but not only that, it can go for public transit, and depending on the county where you're at there in Georgia, it can go for seaports. So just a lot of attention that is given on an annual basis, and this year is not unlike any other years.
T-splost. That right?
T-splost.
All right.
That's how I pronounce it.
Hey, I found my
That's
new
how it
favorite
works.
acronym. I love that. So we were saying there at least 7 counties are putting this on the ballot come November 5th. It looks like for the most part they're all kind of looking or asking about, asking the same question here.
Yeah.
And it does include, we should mention, 2 of the top 3 most populous counties in Georgia, Gwinnett and Cobb County. But what are they asking voters to decide on?
Yeah, you mentioned Gwinnett looking to add a 1% sales tax. So they don't have this. They're not renewing anything. They're looking to add this tax. The focus there in Gwinnett being, and as you would assume, being in the Atlanta area, a high increased need for transit. what they're looking to do is they're looking to have this 1% sales tax applied for transit improvements. 1% sales tax in Gwinnett County, how much is that going to raise? This tax, over the course of 3 decades, they estimate it would raise $17 billion. So quite a bit of revenue again coming in. Worth pointing out with these taxes, these are sales taxes. Again, the focus being on transportation. That's where they're getting the money from. Out of the state's nearly 160 counties, more than 100 have it. So yeah, it is very, very common. Typically, if you're driving through Georgia, there's a better than average chance that you've got a sales tax that is being applied. The purpose, benefit going for transportation. If you're in the Atlanta area, yeah, it's in addition to counties being able to have their own local transportation taxes, the city of Atlanta can have their own as well. So I say double dipping, but there is a city and a county tax that's implemented in that area. So yeah, anytime you're in the Atlanta region, more than likely you're going to be paying a little extra again with the benefit going for transportation work.
Let's zip over to the other side of the country here to California. We've got a number of, a few cities answering or being asked to vote on similar questions here November 5th. There's also a statewide ballot question in California, and I suppose we can start there, Keith.
If we're going to start on the statewide ballot question, looking to whether or not to amend the constitutional requirement there in California of certain local ballot measures have to meet a certain threshold, which is above 50%. Like 2/3 support is required for passage of certain questions. The distinction there being, if you've got a general, say for our purposes, a general transportation funding question that you're asking voters to approve, it only requires a simple majority. But if you've got a question that wants to get a specific project done, like improvements to an interstate there, it would require 66% approval. What they're wanting to do with this ballot question, statewide ballot question, is to lower that threshold that would be required for a specific project to benefit if it's approved by voters. So, yeah, California is unique in that they've got that set up there for questions, and it's not limited to transportation questions. It's all questions that are going to be on a ballot for voters to decide on. But yes, that is one of the statewide questions that'll be available for California voters.
And then, as I said, there are a number of cities also looking at this issue as well. We'll kind of run through a few of them here, starting with San Diego. What are they looking to do?
San Diego voters will get to decide whether they want to increase the local sales tax there. What would benefit from this sales tax increase is they would be able to work on potholes, repair streets. How much money would a 1% sales tax, which is what they're wanting to do with an increase, it would raise about $400 million a year. There is no end date. This is not for the next decade or next 5 years, what have you. It is voters would have to go back to the ballot and decide to end it. So most likely you're looking at a lifetime tax increase here. But again, the beneficiary would be transportation.
And looks like the city of Napa is considering something pretty similar there as well. 2 more, Placer County and the city of San Francisco also looking at this issue in different ways. Which one kind of stands out to you there, Keith?
Yeah, well, they're in Placer County. There are multiple cities that are going to be deciding on transportation funding questions. Auburn being one. Then you've got Lincoln, Rockland, Roseville. They've got local questions on their ballot. For San Francisco, the focus there is on robotaxi companies, ride-hailing companies, wanting to get additional tax revenue from those companies, not the drivers this additional tax would not apply to drivers. But yeah, what they're wanting to do there in San Francisco is implement a 1% tax on those companies, ultimately increasing the amount of tax applied to 4.5%. They estimate that this would generate in the neighborhood of about $25 million a year, and they would be using that money to improve railway service there in the San Francisco area. So an effort to keep people or get people off of the roads is what they're angling for there in San Francisco.
We'll leave it there, Keith. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And that's our show for today. We thank you for listening. Until next time, take care and drive safe.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife.
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome, and I am
a
professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.